This is part 2 of my Bible series on Genesis 6, 1 through 7. In the previous video, we showed that the history of Israel demonstrates the meaning of Genesis 6, 1 through 7. We talked about how Solomon was told by God that if he worshipped false gods, then Israel would be cut off. And Solomon did worship false gods because his wives caused him to do so. And as a result, the royalty of Israel was corrupted for almost the entire line of the kings of Judah. And we talked about Jezebel and Ahab and Athaliah. And we saw pretty clearly this phenomenon where the followers of God would marry people who did not follow God and worshipped other gods. And this was done particularly by the rich and the powerful, the influential. And because these pagans took positions of power in the royalty of the northern half of Israel and the southern half, this resulted in the destruction and the corruption of the Israelites throughout their history, and they were eventually taken away. 1 Kings 18 says, "When Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water." Can you imagine that? Being a prophet of God and having to hide in a cave, and somebody has to bring you food just so you don't starve? I mean, it sounds like Anne Frank. Well, this was happening in the northern half of Israel because King Ahab married this Zidonian woman who was evil. She was a murderer, and she worshipped Baal because she was not an Israelite. Remember, God told the Israelites long before they even became a monarchy, "When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them." Remember, Ahab married Jezebel, the Zidonian. "Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly." 2 Samuel 11 says that David sent Joab his general and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon. But later on we find that David's son Solomon married an Ammonite and made this woman's son the next king. And we find that this son that they had together, Rehoboam, was an evil man, so evil that there were sodomites in the land, and the Bible tells us that during his reign, the Israelites did even more evil than the people that the Israelites destroyed when they conquered the land of Canaan. So the Israelites obviously are not doing what God told them to do. So at this point, we're going to go into the family of David and the kings of Judah. Remember, it's the mighty men of renown who are, well, we're going to focus on the royalty of Israel, the mighty men, the rich and the powerful. In Genesis 6, 1 through 7, it tells us that these children that these people had, the followers of God married the people who did not follow God, and they raised up children, and they became the mighty and the renowned, the rich and the powerful. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, as we did in the previous class, the royalty of Israel, the rich and the powerful and the influential. So this problem of pagan infiltration goes all the way back to David. 1 Samuel 27 says, "David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Geshurites and the Amalekites, for those nations were of old the inhabitants of the land. and he smote the land and left neither man nor woman alive. So we know for sure that the Geshurites were living in the land of Canaan, or somewhere around the land of Canaan, before the Israelites even arrived. We know the Geshurites, they were not Israelites. And we know that David destroyed them. But we find in 1 Chronicles 3, 1 through 4, that David married Mecca, the daughter of Talmi, king of Geshur. That doesn't make any sense. Why would David destroy the Geshurites and then marry a Geshurite? Why would he do that? Well, remember, God told them not to do this. He said that if you engage in these covenants with the people of the land, then God will destroy these suddenly. Well, most people don't really think about this Geshurite woman. They just see her as just one of the other wives of David, but it's not a coincidence that the child that this woman would have with David, whose name was Absalom, would try to overthrow the kingdom and murder his own father. So again, David and this woman Mecca, who was a Geshurite, a non-Israelite, they had a son who tried to overthrow the kingdom. As far as we know, this is the only son who tried to do that, but it's not a big surprise that his mother just happens to be a non-Israelite. She's pagan. This woman that David married, as far as we know, is the only woman that was a non-Israelite. It's possible that Abigail was not an Israelite. She was a Carmelite. We don't really know what that means. But we know for sure that Mecca was a Geshurite. She was not an Israelite, and her son tried to overthrow the kingdom. Most likely, the reason that he tried to overthrow the kingdom was that she was planting a seed in Absalom's head. She said, I'd love for you to meet your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles, but the problem is they're all dead because your father killed them. And she was planting this seed in his head for his entire life that David, his father, was evil because he destroyed all of his mother's people. So when Absalom tried to overthrow the kingdom, he thought that he was doing something good. And he actually almost succeeded. Most of Israel followed Absalom, and he came close to overthrowing the kingdom. But David's men were seasoned soldiers, and so they were able to fend him off. So again, you can see that this pagan influence began even at the time of David. You see, this woman, Mecca, realized that if her son took over the kingdom, then she would be the most powerful person in Israel. Because if her son was the king, he would listen to her, and therefore she, again, would be the most powerful person in the kingdom. And she would have her revenge on David for destroying her people, the Geshurites. So really, she was the primary motivation behind this insurrection, most likely. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us this, but this is the most likely explanation for why Absalom tried to kill his own father. But the story doesn't end there. Absalom was eventually killed because he tried to overthrow the kingdom, but before he died, he had a daughter who he named after his mother, which suggests that he loved his mother. I'm going to call this woman Mecca II. So Absalom, this wicked man who tried to kill his own father, had a daughter named Mecca II, and we find in 2 Chronicles 11 that Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, who became the next king, took Mecca, the daughter of Absalom, and he loved her above all of his wives and concubines. And he made her son the next king of Judah. So it gets kind of difficult to picture all this, so I'm going to provide a family tree, so to speak. So David married Mecca the Geshurite and they had this evil son Absalom who tried to overthrow the kingdom and kill his own father. And we don't know who Absalom's wife was, but he had Mecca the second, who is part Geshurite. And we find later on that Mecca the second worshipped idols. She kept idols, so we know that she had a lot of influence from her father and her grandmother. Now, David had another wife, Bathsheba, and she produced Solomon. And we know that Solomon married pagan women, and so he went after false gods. And his chief wife, Naamah, was an Ammonite. And so they both worshiped false gods. They had Rehoboam, and we're told that during Rehoboam's reign, Israel did all the evil of the people of the land, and even more evil. And Rehoboam was half Ammonite. So you have a man who is evil, who's half Ammonite, who marries a woman who's the daughter of Absalom, a murderer, who's part Geshurite, and these two then produce the kings of Judah for the next 200 or 300 years. And we find that Abijah is evil, and that's not a big surprise because he was produced by these pagans. And not all the kings in the line of Judah were evil. Asa and Jehoshaphat, for example, were good. Jehoram was evil because he married the daughter of Jezebel, Athaliah. She was half Sidonian, and we learned in the previous class that Athaliah destroyed almost the entire family of the line of David. She destroyed all of her grandchildren. And the only reason that Athaliah existed is because Ahab, the king of the northern half of Israel, married a Zidonian, Jezebel, and she murdered and worshipped Baal. Now, as you go down the line of kings, the historians that wrote the books of Kings and the books of Chronicles, they don't really mention the wives of these kings because I don't think they really believed that it was relevant, because once you see the infiltration of all these pagans early in the line of David, you can see what's going to happen. It's obvious that the Israelites were going to be turned into to paganism because there was so much pagan infiltration. That's why in Genesis 6, 1 through 7, it says, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." And the next sentence, the very next sentence says, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So immediately after God saw the followers of God marrying people who didn't follow God, he knew that that was the beginning of the end, that it was only a matter of time before the pre-flood people became corrupt. At the same time, the historians that wrote the books of Kings and the books of Chronicles, they recorded the pagan infiltration during the time of David and Solomon and Rehoboam, and at that point, they stopped recording the wives of all these kings because they probably knew that it wasn't really relevant. Once you know that the line of David is corrupted with all these pagans, it's not really even necessary to mention all the wives that these kings married, because it's obvious that the line of David was going to fall apart. And that's why God told Solomon, if you or your children go after false gods, I'm paraphrasing, then Israel will be cut off. Because just Solomon marrying these pagan women, because he was so powerful and influential, and his children would be the kings of Judah for hundreds and hundreds of years, just him marrying these pagan women, that would result in Israel being cut off, because again, all of the kings of Judah resulted from Solomon's pagan marriages. Now, as I mentioned, King Asa was actually a good king. 1 Kings 15 tells us, "In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah, and his mother's name was Mecca, the daughter of Absalom." That's just a different spelling of Absalom. And Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. And he took away the Sodomites out of the land, and removed all the idols that his fathers had made, and also Mecca his mother. Even her he removed from being queen, because she had made an idol in a grove. And Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron. So we see that this Mecca the second, she was worshiping pagan idols. And it's not a big surprise that she was worshiping idols, because her father was this evil Absalom who tried to overthrow the kingdom, and her grandmother was Mecca, who was a Geshurite. So again, God told them not to marry the pagans of the land, but they disobeyed, and as a result, the kingdom was just plagued throughout its entire history. Now, I should mention that it says that Mecca was Asa's mother, but Mecca the second was not Asa's mother. She was his grandmother. The King James Bible doesn't use the word grandmother or grandfather. I think grandmother might appear once, but other than that, it just doesn't use those words. Your grandchildren were considered your children. So when it says that Mecca the second was Asa's mother, she wasn't really his mother. She was his grandmother. That's how we would say it today. So, again, we can see through this family tree the horrible infiltration that occurred, and all the death and the destruction. So we're just going into more detail. We studied Solomon, we studied Jezebel and Athaliah, and now we have gone into more detail in the family of David. Now I'd like to read Deuteronomy 13. God told the Israelites before they entered the promised land, and before they even became a monarchy, if thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son, or thy daughter, or the wife of thy bosom, or thy friend, which is as thine own soul, entice thee secretly, saying, Let us go and serve other gods, which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are round about you, nigh unto thee or far from thee, from the one end of the earth unto the other end of the earth, thou shalt not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him, neither shalt thine eye pity him, neither shalt thou spare, neither shalt thou conceal him, but thou shalt surely kill him. Thine hand shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And thou shalt stone him with stones that he die, because he has sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and shall do no more any such wickedness as this among you. So that's what God told the Israelites. Again, even before they entered the promised land. But David disobeyed. He married a Geshurite. And Solomon disobeyed. He married an Ammonite. And Rehoboam disobeyed because he married Mecca the second, who was part Geshurite. And Ahab disobeyed. He married a Zidonian. And Jehoram disobeyed because he married a half-Zidonian. So God was very clear. He warned them not to do this, and they disobeyed, and as a result, the Israelites were destroyed, because the mighty men, the rich and the famous, the mighty and the renowned, the royalty of Israel, integrated pagans into their families, and as a result, Israel was cut off and destroyed, as God said it would be. Now, it's interesting. Deuteronomy 17 tells us, When thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself. That's interesting because Solomon had horses brought out of Egypt, according to 1 Kings 10. Then it goes on to say, nor cause the people to return to Egypt. Well, 1 Kings 3 says Solomon made affinity with the Pharaoh of Egypt and took Pharaoh's daughter. So he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. It goes on to say, for as much as the Lord has said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. But again, Solomon went to Egypt and made peace with the Pharaoh and married his daughter. It goes on to say, neither shall he multiply wives to himself. Well, we know that Solomon multiplied wives, that his heart turned not away. Was Solomon's heart turned away? Yes. He worshipped false gods. He broke the first commandment. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. Read 1 Kings 10. It says, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. A talent of gold is 70 pounds. And if you continue to read, it says, it shall be when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priests the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes, and do them, that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and that he turn not aside from the commandment, to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children, in the midst of Israel. So Solomon apparently did not read this book. It's believed that the book of Deuteronomy was actually lost. It was there. It was in the temple. Apparently it was later found. But the kings really did not read these words, and they did not obey these words. Solomon did not. Rehoboam did not. Ahab did not. And as a result, again, Israel was cut off. But it's interesting that every single thing that God told the kings not to do, Solomon did. So all that said, the last thing we're going to have time to talk about is Nehemiah and Ezra. The Israelites were destroyed, and the northern half was taken into captivity by the Assyrian Empire, and they never retained their national identity. But the southern half of Israel, which we know as Judah, was taken into slavery by the Babylonians. But after 70 years of slavery, they were released as the Medo-Persian Empire conquered them. And they released them, and the Judeans actually returned to Jerusalem. And there were two men that were some of the leaders of the people, Nehemiah and Ezra. And read Nehemiah 13. It says, in those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and Moab. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of the people. And I contended with them, and cursed them, and smote certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. Shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil, to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. So notice that the returning Jews are marrying Ammonites. Remember, Solomon married an Ammonite and made her son the king of Judah and Israel. And notice that Nehemiah is so angry at the returning Jews for doing this that he actually slaps them in their face. It says that he smote them and plucked off their hair. Can you imagine that? Slapping your fellow followers of God in the face? That's how strongly Nehemiah felt about marrying pagan people and integrating them into the stock of Israel. So the Israelites were destroyed. They were taken off into captivity. All kinds of evil ensued because they married these pagan women, and their prophets were being killed, murdered. They had to hide in caves. They had to have food brought to them just so that they wouldn't starve. There were certain times where the Israelites, they were besieged and they were starving to the point where they had to eat their own children in order to survive. The family of Jehoshaphat was almost completely destroyed. His children were massacred, and so on and so forth. All kinds of evil ensued simply because the Israelites refused to follow God's commandments to keep themselves pure. They married the pagans, and the pagans turned them away from God. But after the kingdom was destroyed and the people were wiped off the land, they came back, and the first thing that they do when they come back is they start to marry Ammonites and Moabites, the people that God told them hundreds of years previously not to marry. So they're doing the very same thing that Solomon did to destroy the kingdom. Ezra 9 says, "The princes came to me, saying, The people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and the rulers hath been chief in this trespass." Notice it says that the hand of the princes and the rulers have been chief in this trespass. Again, remember Genesis 6 says the children of these marriages became the mighty and renowned, the rich and the powerful. For some reason in the Middle East, people who were rich and powerful often would marry the pagans, and one reason for that is that the rich and the powerful, obviously they had more money and more influence, and people who had money and influence oftentimes in the Middle East would take more wives. They would engage in polygamy. Remember Genesis 6, 1 through 7 says that they took wives all which they chose. 2 Chronicles 11 says that Rehoboam was a man who desired many wives. He took 18 wives and 80 concubines, and begot 28 sons and 80 daughters. Ezra 9 goes on to say, "And when I heard this thing, I rent my garment and my mantle, and plucked off the hair of my head and my beard, and sat down astonished. Then were assembled unto me every one that trembled at the words of the God of Israel, because of the transgression of those that had been carried away, and I sat astonished until the evening sacrifice." So Ezra was so dumbfounded by what the returning Jews had done that he actually ripped off the hair of his own head and his beard. Then Ezra prays to God in the same chapter. He says, "We have forsaken thy commandments, which thou hast commanded by thy servants the prophets, saying, The land unto which ye go to possess it is an unclean land, with the filthiness of the people of the lands, with their abominations, which have filled it from one end to the other with their uncleanness. Now therefore give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever, that ye may be strong, and eat the good of the land, and leave it for an inheritance to your children forever. And after all this that is come upon us, for our evil deeds and for our great trespass, seeing that our God has punished us less than our iniquities deserve, and has given us such deliverance as this, should we again break thy commandments, and join affinity with the people of these abominations? Wouldst thou not be angry with us till thou hadst consumed us, so that there should be no remnant nor escaping? Our Lord God of Israel, thou art righteous, for we remain yet escaped. As it is this day, behold, we are before thee in our trespasses, for we cannot stand before thee because of this. In Ezra 10, it says, Now when Ezra had prayed, and when he had confessed, weeping and casting himself down before the house of God, there assembled unto him out of Israel a very great congregation of men and women and children, for the people wept very sore. And Sheshaniah the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said unto Ezra, We have trespassed against our God, and have taken strange wives of the people of the land. Yet now there is hope in Israel concerning this thing. Now therefore let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives, and such as are born of them, according to the counsel of my Lord, and of those that tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. So we have more biblical evidence that shows us what really is going on in Genesis 6, 1 through 7. Again, we can see through the history of Israel that when the followers of God marry those who do not follow God, and the rich and the powerful are chief in this trespass, as Ezra put it, the result is the corruption of the people. And we can just keep going on and on and on and on, and we're going to continue in the next video to explain more about this, and we'll provide more evidence. But you can see when you look at this family line, what is happening to the Israelites. It's the same phenomenon that we read about in Genesis 6, 1 through 7. Again, whatever you believe about Genesis 6, you cannot deny the parallels. Now, a lot of people would say, well, why were the Jews divorcing? You're not supposed to divorce. Well, what if the Israelites had divorced these pagan people? Would it have made a difference? Would it have saved all of Israel? Think about that. You know, a lot of pastors make kind of a mistake. They read the Sermon on the Mount, where it says that the only just cause for divorce is fornication. And a lot of people see that and say, well, that's it. That's the only justification for divorce. That's actually a mistake. That's a common misconception. It does seem like Jesus is saying that on the Sermon on the Mount, but what you find when you look at the logic behind the Ten Commandments and the penalty for breaking certain commandments, you see that there's actually a lot more justification for divorce than simply fornication. Again, many pastors, they kind of make an error there when they assume that that's the only justification for divorce. God commanded the Israelites to destroy the people of the land. He said, I want you to utterly destroy them. Don't make any covenant with them. Don't show any mercy to them. So if Solomon had divorced his pagan wives, if he had married a woman of God, then Israel would not have been destroyed. So there's a lot more to talk about. We're going to go into the Bible to show us what the phrase sons of God means. We didn't have time to do that much today, but we're going to talk about the phrase sons of God and more things relating to Genesis 6, 1 through 7 in the next video. And we're going to continue to talk about these marriages that we see in the Bible that help us to explain why these inappropriate marriages during the pre-flood times were so devastating and caused the people to become corrupt. So I'll look forward to seeing you in part 3 of this Bible series.